No one expected the war to start on a peaceful diplomatic ship between two empires. The humans were there to negotiate resource sharing, and the Varelians, an advanced alien race, were supposed to offer safe passage. Instead, the ship exploded into chaos before the talks could even begin. Screams echoed in the metal halls while laser fire lit the corridors. Both sides blamed each other instantly. Trust died before it could ever grow. The war started not with a declaration, but with a misunderstanding soaked in blood. She had warned them. Princess Yelani of the Varelians had begged her generals not to allow humans aboard the royal cruiser. She believed humans were impulsive, violent, and disrespectful to alien culture. When the alarm sounded, she looked directly at the human ambassador and said the words he would never forget. "This is what you are, chaos." Then she vanished behind her armored guards. Major Cade Mayers was trained to expect betrayal, but not from a race that once asked for Earth's help. He didn't have time to argue politics. His orders were clear: protect the ambassador, and if needed, fight. But nothing made sense. There were no enemy ships outside, no warning signs before the sabotage. He kept thinking, why would we ruin peace we came to build? Then he saw something that changed everything. A Varelian child trapped under a fallen beam, and a human soldier lifting it to save her. Yelani saw it too. From behind her troops, she watched the same man she had just insulted risk his life for one of her own. Her people didn't notice, but she couldn't stop watching him. He didn't hesitate. He didn't even ask if the girl was Varelian or human. He simply acted, and in that one act, everything she believed about humans cracked a little. The ship split into two factions. One believed humans started the sabotage. The other believed the Varelian military planted it to sabotage peace. No one knew the truth, and no one cared to find out. Within hours, warships launched from both sides. By morning, 3 colonies were burning in space. Yelani's mother, the Empress, declared humans as enemies of the galaxy. She commanded her daughters to lead the charge, and Yelani had no choice but to obey. Still, she couldn't erase the image of the human who saved her people's child. That act kept her silent while the War Council raged on. She said nothing when her sisters pushed for extermination. She only nodded like a statue holding back a scream. On Earth, Cade was pulled into emergency briefings. His bravery made him a hero, but it also marked him for another mission. A secret one, not for fighting but for understanding. Command wanted someone who had seen the inside of Varelian politics. Someone who had stood beside the alien princess, even if only briefly. Cade didn't know what they were really sending him into. He only knew it was back into enemy space. The new mission wasn't war, it was infiltration. They didn't want Cade to shoot. They wanted him to see, observe, understand why the princess hesitated, why she looked back during evacuation. Why, when she said, "I hate humans," her eyes said something else. It made no sense to him then. But it would soon. The cruiser they assigned him to was disguised as a medical ship. It would cross neutral space and pretend to deliver aid to a refugee planet. On that planet was someone Command believed could be reached, Princess Yelani herself. Cade thought it was suicide. But he also thought of the little girl he saved, and the way the princess had watched him. Something about that moment haunted him. It made him say yes. In the silence of his bunk before departure, Cade stared at the hologram of the explosion. He watched it play again and again, trying to find the trigger. Something hidden, something real. But the fire always started in the same place, near the Varelian power core. Too close to be coincidence, but too risky to accuse. He shut it off and packed his gear. His real mission was not to expose, but to connect. That night before launch, Cade looked at the stars and wondered what it would take for someone who hated humans to fall. Asleep on one shoulder, the medical cruiser dropped out of hyperspace. Above the shattered moon of Carol 9, Debris still floated from the orbital bombing weeks ago. From the viewport, Cade could see black scars on the planet below. It was supposed to be a neutral zone, but nothing about it looked peaceful. The captain gave the all clear. The ship entered the atmosphere under fake humanitarian codes. Cade stayed silent as he adjusted the hidden scanner inside his collar. He didn't come here to save lives. He came to find one alien girl with too many secrets. The city they landed in was mostly ruins. Buildings leaned like wounded soldiers. The smell of smoke and acid drifted through the cracked air vents. Cade walked with the other officers through a crowd of refugees. Most of them were Varelians, weak and frightened. He expected to be hated, but they mostly looked past him. Their eyes weren't angry, they were tired. That bothered him more than hate ever could. He found her inside a shattered library, turned into a command post. Princess Yelani was not wearing royal robes this time. Her armor was scorched and dented. Her hair was tied back roughly, not like the polished braid she wore before. She held a datapad in one hand and barked orders to officers with blood-stained boots. When she saw Cade, she didn't smile. She didn't flinch either. She just stared at him, then walked away. He followed her through the halls, past wounded soldiers and flickering lights. No one stopped him. No one questioned him, as if they knew he wasn't here to kill. Yelani didn't speak until they reached a narrow balcony that overlooked the smoking city. Then she asked him why he came. Her voice was cold but calm. Cade answered honestly. He said he wanted to understand what started the war. Her fingers tightened around the railing. "You want truth," she said. "Truth burned with the ship. Everyone lies now, even me." She turned her head, but didn't look at him. "I told them I hated your kind. I believed it. Until I saw you lift a burning beam off a child. That image won't leave me. It ruined my hatred." She finally faced him, and her eyes were sharp but hollow. "So tell me, human, what do I do now?" Cade didn't answer. He just sat down on a broken crate and waited. Silence stretched between them. Finally she sat beside him, but not too close. The stars above blinked through the ash clouds. Her posture slowly eased, her hands unclenched. Cade watched her. He didn't try to argue or explain, he just waited. Eventually, she spoke again, softer this time. "I don't think humans caused the explosion, but my mother thinks otherwise. She wants your world destroyed." He looked down. "And you?" he asked. Her answer was a whisper. "I want to breathe without hate." It was such a simple line, yet it felt like a stone dropped into deep water. Cade nodded once. Then, "Maybe we start here. No orders, no weapons. Just two people watching the same sky." She didn't move, but something in her changed. The line of her jaw relaxed, her voice stopped shaking. She said nothing more, but she didn't leave. A medic walked by and offered her a nutrient packet. She refused it. Cade took one and placed it in her hand anyway. She stared at it like it was an alien thing, then finally accepted. She ate in silence while he watched the burning city below. Even silence meant something now. It meant she wasn't pushing him away. Later that night, inside the darkened control room, she entered a private code into the terminal. A file appeared, one that had been locked by high command. She looked at him and said, "This proves the explosion didn't start near your core. It started inside ours." Cade didn't speak. He knew this file could end the war, or start a worse one. She didn't send it yet. She just let him see it. That was trust. When the emergency lights dimmed for the cycle rest, she remained beside him. Her head tilted back and rested on the edge of his shoulder. He froze for a moment, unsure if it was a test or a moment of weakness. But when he looked down, her eyes were already closed. She didn't scream when war started. She didn't scream when her people burned. But now, in the middle of ruins, with a human at her side, she finally let herself rest. Yelani didn't speak when she woke up, but Cade felt the change in her breathing. Her head lifted slowly, and her eyes opened to the gray light of dawn through the cracked window. She blinked and turned her head away, clearly surprised that she had fallen asleep on him, but she didn't apologize. She simply stood and fixed her armor. Then she walked to the console and began typing without a word. Cade stayed seated. He didn't want to make the moment awkward by speaking too soon. His shoulder was sore, but not from the weight of her. It was from holding still for hours, afraid to disturb the only peaceful rest she'd had in days. He watched her fingers fly across the interface, unlocking the encrypted logs from the destroyed cruiser. She didn't look back at him, but she knew he was watching. "These files are not supposed to exist," she said quietly. "I copied them when I began to doubt our story. They show everything. Internal power levels, maintenance reports, movement of security units, and this." She pointed to a line of code that Cade didn't understand. This signal wasn't human. It was sent from one of our own stealth ships just seconds before the detonation. A command pulse to trigger the overload. Cade leaned forward. He didn't understand the symbols, but he understood what they meant. Someone in the Varelian military had sabotaged their own ship, possibly to blame the humans and start the war. His jaw tightened as the weight of the truth settled into his gut. This wasn't just a secret. This was a weapon. "If this gets out," he said, "your empire might collapse. People won't accept that their own leaders killed diplomats to start a war." Yelani nodded without speaking. She already knew. That's why she hadn't shared the files with her mother. She didn't know who to trust. And she hated that. The only person she could turn to was human. "We can't send this through regular channels," she said. "My messages are monitored. And if they suspect I've opened this file, I'll be arrested, or worse." Cade looked around the dim room. Cameras were already watching them, probably recording their every move. Time was running out, and they both knew it. He suggested a plan. "Let me take the data. I can transmit it through the Terran Black Line. It's secure, deep code only. They won't trace it back to you." She hesitated, then shook her head. "No, if it comes from your side, they'll call it a forgery. They'll never believe you." Her hands trembled slightly as she backed away from the terminal. "If this truth is going to save lives, it has to come from me." She stepped closer to him and handed over a small data crystal. "But you keep the copy. If I disappear, you'll know why. And you'll know what to do." Cade took the crystal and nodded slowly. He didn't like the plan, but it was better than doing nothing. His mission was already off the rails. Now it had become something far more dangerous. Before they left the room, she looked at him and said, "I still don't like humans, but I don't think I hate you." Then she walked past him without waiting for a reply. Cade stared after her, unsure what he had just heard. It wasn't friendship. It wasn't trust. But it was a crack in the wall she had built between their kinds. Outside, soldiers moved with urgency. An alert had gone out. A Varelian war vessel was approaching the zone, claiming to escort the princess back to the capital. But Yelani hadn't requested it. Her face went pale. "They know," she whispered. "They're coming to take me away before I speak." Cade grabbed her arm. "Then we leave now." They ran through the corridors, dodging patrols and slipping through maintenance tunnels. Cade's knowledge of Terran stealth routes came in handy. They avoided 2 checkpoints and made it to the edge of the camp. An old cargo skiff waited nearby. Not fast, but enough to escape the sensors. As they climbed in, Cade fired a jammer into the sky. Just enough to delay the warship scanners. The skiff lifted off slowly. Yelani stayed low, her hand gripping the edge of the console. Her expression was unreadable, but she didn't let go of his jacket the whole ride. Asterisk, the skiff trembled as it broke through the last layer of the planet's thick clouds. Smoke and lightning rolled through the sky behind them. and flashes of light hinted at the Varelian warship scanning for their trail. Cade took the controls while Yelani sat beside him, her fingers curled tightly around the armrest. The wind outside howled, but inside, the silence between them was louder. They couldn't outrun a full war cruiser, but they didn't need to. They only had to make it to the outer ridge where Cade's extraction point was hidden. It was a stretch of broken mountain, impossible to scan from orbit due to the crystal veins in the rocks. Cade had picked it long ago in case things went bad. He just never expected to be using it with a Varelian princess beside him. Yelani spoke first. "You know I'm going to be hunted after this." Cade didn't look at her. "I already know." She turned her head to the window and said nothing more. But the way her voice trembled told him she wasn't afraid of death. She was afraid of what it would mean to her people, of what they would do to silence the truth she had uncovered. The skiff hit a small updraft, causing a sharp jolt. Cade steadied it, but Yelani gripped his arm briefly before letting go. For someone raised in royal command, she was surprisingly calm, not cold, just focused. Cade found himself watching her longer than he should have. Her green skin shimmered under the flickering lights. The gold line on her crown caught the dim sun. Even in fear, she looked regal. They reached the mountain pass just as the last daylight faded. Cade guided the skiff into a natural cave formation and shut down the power core. Without engine heat, the cruiser above wouldn't spot them. He opened the hatch and stepped into the crisp alien air. Yelani followed, wrapping her cloak tightly around her armor. They were safe for now, but time was already slipping. Inside the cave was a small human outpost, hidden behind a panel of rocks. Cade entered the security code, and the panel slid open with a hiss. It wasn't much. Just a transmitter, a generator, and enough supplies for 3 days. But it had one thing they needed most, an uplink to the Black Line, the secret channel between Earth and its deep agents. Yelani stepped into the shadows and looked around. "So this is where the humans hide." Her voice was dry, almost amused. Cade smiled faintly. "Only when we're trying to stay alive." She brushed her hair back and walked to the console. "Then let's try not to die before sending the message." Her attempt at humor wasn't perfect, but it made him chuckle. They worked together, uploading the files she had stolen. The process was slow due to the low power relay. Every few seconds, the signal flickered. But Cade kept the system stable while Yelani monitored the data. She was focused and graceful, and for a moment, he forgot she once called him a virus on the galaxy. While the files transmitted, she leaned against the wall and stared at him. "Do you trust me?" Cade looked up, surprised. "You're the one carrying the truth. I should ask you that." She nodded once. "I trusted you when I fell asleep on your shoulder. That should count for something." The corners of her mouth lifted slightly, but the moment was brief. The transmitter beeped softly. "File sent." Cade exhaled in relief, but Yelani remained tense. Now comes the part where someone tries to kill us for telling the truth. She stepped back from the panel and reached for a stun blade tucked into her belt. Cade tightened his grip on his own sidearm. He didn't like it, but she was right. Someone would come soon. Suddenly, the cave trembled. Dust fell from above as a sonic pulse shook the stone. Cade ran to the entrance and peered out. A small scout ship was descending fast. Too small to be a cruiser, but too sleek to be civilian. "They found us," he said. Yelani was already at his side, weapon drawn. "Then we fight. Together." The scout ship landed near the mouth of the cave in a cloud of ash and dust. Cade ducked back as a flash scanner lit the stone around them. He grabbed his sidearm, heart thudding with every second. Yelani knelt beside him, silent, her blade ready. The enemy was fast. Whoever sent them didn't wait for orders. They came to erase the truth before it reached the stars. 2 armored figures exited the ship. They didn't speak or call out. They moved like ghosts, trained and efficient. Their helmets bore no insignia, only black glass where their eyes should be. Cade recognized the movement. Assassins, not soldiers, not enforcers. These were the kind of people sent to make problems disappear without a trace. He motioned to Yelani, pointing to a rock outcrop near the left wall. She nodded and moved quickly, silent as smoke. Cade stayed low and circled to the right. They had no time to plan, no backup. If they failed, the message would be the last thing anyone heard from either of them. He steadied his breathing and waited for the signal. Yelani moved first. She threw a flash pellet near the entrance, forcing the assassins to turn. Cade emerged from the side and fired 2 precise shots. One connected with the shoulder of the lead attacker, throwing him back. The second assassin rolled away and fired a pulse shot that scorched the stone inches from Yelani's arm. She dashed forward, blade gleaming in the dim light, and struck the second assassin's arm. Sparks flew as the armor cracked. The enemy shoved her back hard, but she recovered fast. Cade joined her, firing again, this time hitting the scout's leg. The attacker dropped, and Yelani finished it with one clean slash across the chest. The first assassin tried to flee, limping toward the ship. Cade sprinted after him. Just before he reached the ramp, Cade tackled him from behind and pinned him to the ground. A brief struggle ended with a heavy punch that cracked the helmet's visor. Inside was not a soldier. It was a young Varelian, barely older than a cadet. His lips moved, but no sound came out before he passed out cold. Cade stood, breathing heavily. Yelani approached, checking the area with sharp eyes. "We need to move. More will come." She looked down at the unconscious one. "He's just a boy," Cade nodded. "But trained to kill without question." She said nothing more. She stepped into the ship and began checking systems. "We can use this," she said. "If we clear the ID tags, we can fly undetected." They worked fast. Cade removed the beacon and burned the internal registry. Yelani replaced the command core with her override chip. Within minutes, the ship was ready. Before leaving, she placed the unconscious assassin gently on the edge of the cave with a canister of oxygen. "He doesn't deserve to die for a lie," she whispered. They lifted off just as another pulse scan swept the sky. The new ship, masked with false codes, flew through undetected. Cade kept his hands on the controls, but Yelani sat beside him in silence. She wasn't calm. She wasn't panicked either. She looked like someone who had lost a part of herself and didn't know if she wanted it back. The stars opened above them like cold fire. Cade set course for a neutral moon orbiting a dying planet. It had no military presence, no scanners, just old relay towers that could bounce signals without question. From there, Yelani could send her voice directly to the Varelian people. Not through command, not through her mother, but through the raw line of truth. "Are you ready for this?" Cade asked. She didn't answer right away. She stared out the window, her voice low. "They'll call me a traitor, a liar, maybe even a murderer." She finally looked at him, "But I'll still tell the truth." Her voice didn't shake this time. It carried the kind of strength that didn't need a throne. For a long while, they flew without speaking. Then Yelani rested her head back against the wall and closed her eyes. "You're still annoying," she murmured. "But less than before." Cade smiled and said nothing. The stolen scout ship entered orbit around the shadowed moon, where dead relay towers spun in silence. Most had lost power years ago, but one remained active, blinking dimly like a dying star. Cade brought the ship into its range, eyes scanning for heat traces or transmissions. Nothing showed. They were alone. Or at least alone for now. Yelani stood beside him, arms crossed, watching the cracked surface of the moon through the glass. Her armor still bore scorch marks from the last battle, but she wore it with pride. Her expression was calm, but her fingers tapped against her leg. The truth she carried was heavier than any blade. And she knew once she shared it, there would be no going back. They landed quietly near the tower base. Dust rose around them as the ship powered down. Cade grabbed the data core from the console while Yelani adjusted her communicator. The cold outside bit through their suits as they stepped onto the surface. The relay tower stood tall and silent, like a grave monument. Cade reached the access port and connected the cable. Lights flickered. The system still worked barely. Yelani knelt beside the console and uploaded her message. Her voice, steady and firm, would broadcast across every open Varelian civilian channel, unencrypted, unfiltered. To the people of my world, she began. I am Princess Yelani, daughter of the Empress. I bring you truth that was buried in lies. Cade watched as she spoke. No notes, no script, just raw memory and conviction. She told them about the explosion, the data she found, the signal that triggered the sabotage from inside their own fleet. She admitted she didn't know who exactly gave the order, but that she would find out. And she would not stay silent while others paid the price. My hatred of humans blinded me, she said. I believed we were better. I was wrong. The man beside me saved my life. He protected our people when his own were dying. He saw me as a person, not an enemy. That's more than I ever did for him. She paused, staring into the camera. I may never sit on the throne, but I won't let the truth die in shadows. When she finished, Cade sealed the transmission. The signal launched skyward, bouncing across the galaxy. Within minutes, the message would reach hundreds of thousands of Varelian citizens. There would be confusion, rage, fear, but also a spark. The first spark of something new, something honest, something dangerous. Yelani stood slowly, her shoulders tight. They'll send ships now, she said, to silence me. Cade nodded. Let them try. They turned to return to the ship, but the ground shook beneath them. A rumble echoed through the rocky field. Dust sprayed into the air as a vessel broke through the clouds above and descended rapidly. It was sleek and silver, Varelian, not a cruiser. A royal guard ship. Cade raised his weapon, but Yelani placed a hand on his arm. Don't, she said. This one was my sister's. The ship landed, and two figures stepped out in matching black armor. Between them stood another woman, tall, sharp-eyed, and cloaked in blue. Yelani tensed. Commander Viraya, she whispered. My cousin. She serves my mother directly. Viraya approached slowly. She looked at Yelani, then at Cade. You committed treason, she said flatly. You broadcast lies. Yelani didn't move. I broadcast evidence. You can check it yourself. The file's been sent. You can silence me, but you can't stop what I've released. Viraya looked down, face unreadable. Then she did something unexpected. She reached into her armor and pulled out a data tablet. I saw the transmission, she said. And I've seen the matching logs. You're not wrong. But truth doesn't protect you from law. You're still under arrest. Both of you. Cade stepped forward, but Yelani stopped him. Let her speak, she said. She hasn't killed us yet. Viraya sighed. You're lucky I believe in family more than loyalty to the throne. I'll take you both into custody. But not in chains. We're leaving now. You'll speak before the council. What happens after that will depend on them. Yelani nodded. Then we go. The royal guard ship carried them in silence through deep space. Cade sat near the back of the cabin, eyes locked on the cold blue stars through the window. Yelani remained near the front, unmoving. Her hands were folded tightly in her lap. Her cousin Viraya stood between them, speaking to no one. Every second in that ship felt like a countdown they couldn't hear. They were going straight to the Varelian, capital Serana Prime. It was the seat of the Empress, and home to the highest council. The city floated above the planet's surface, suspended by gravity cores, its silver towers piercing the clouds. Cade had only seen it in classified images. Now he was going there as a prisoner, or a witness. Or maybe both, when they landed on the council deck. Guards in black and gold armor surrounded the platform. No chains were placed on them, but the message was clear. Any wrong move would be met with force. Yelani walked ahead, her spine straight, her face unreadable. Cade followed closely, his steps heavy beneath the stares of hundreds of onlookers. Council chamber was a grand dome made of polished crystal and black steel. Around the circular hall, representatives of every Varelian faction sat in silence. At the center stood the Empress herself, tall, crowned, wrapped in deep violet robes. Her eyes, sharp and glowing, focused only on Yelani. "You dare return here," she said. "You speak lies on open channels. And yet you expect mercy." Yelani stepped forward. "I expect justice," she said. "I bring proof of sabotage from our own command. You can deny my voice, but not the data I've shared." She reached into her armor and held up the same crystal Cade had carried. "Here is the original record, not altered, not touched by human hands." Her voice echoed through the dome with clarity and fire. The Empress raised her hand, and a technician stepped forward to receive the data. He connected it to the Council's main feed. Holograms filled the air logs, signal traces, hidden transmissions, and the timeline of the ship's destruction. For several minutes, no one said a word. Then quiet murmurs began to spread. Doubt had entered the room. One elder stood and asked, "If this is true, then why did you flee?" Yelani replied without flinching, "Because I knew no one would listen. Because fear controls this chamber more than truth does. And because a human saved my life while our own assassins hunted us." Her voice did not crack. She faced them all with fire in her eyes. The Empress stepped down from her throne. "And this human," she said coldly, "what part does he play in your rebellion?" Cade stepped forward now. He met the Empress's gaze and said, "I'm not here to destroy your empire. I came because she asked for someone to listen. Someone who didn't see her as a weapon. I'm here because she chose truth over hate." Silence returned to the chamber. Then one by one, council members activated their voting lights. Blue for support, red for rejection. The lights blinked across the dome. More blue than red, but not enough to clear them. The Empress turned to the guards. "Until this is resolved, they will remain under watch. Do not harm them, but do not let them vanish." Yelani and Cade were led to a quiet chamber in the east wing. It was more comfortable than a cell, but still locked from the outside. Yelani sat on the edge of the long stone bench. Cade leaned against the wall. "We spoke," she said quietly. "Now we wait." He looked at her and replied, "Waiting might be harder than the escape." That night, she didn't speak again. She simply lay down beside him on the cold bench, her head near his shoulder, her hand resting near his. The silence between them no longer felt like distance. It felt like understanding. Neither of them reached for the other, but neither pulled away. The next morning, the chamber door opened without warning. A guard stepped inside and signaled for Yelani to follow. Cade stood quickly, ready to fight if needed, but she placed her hand gently on his chest. "It's all right," she said. "They've made a decision." The guard didn't bind their hands. That was the first sign something had changed. They were led through a long hallway filled with quiet voices and still guards. Outside the main chamber, Varela was waiting. She didn't speak, but her face had softened. She gave a single nod to Yelani, then opened the crystal doors. Inside, the Empress stood at the center of the dome, this time alone. No throne, no audience. Only her and her daughter. "I listened to your message again," the Empress said. "And I read the files myself." Her voice was not angry, but not warm either. It was tired. The truth is poison. But sometimes poison kills a greater sickness. She stepped down and stopped in front of Yelani. You have broken our laws. But you may have saved our future. What do you want from me? Yelani stood still, her chin raised. I want the war to end. I want the ones who gave the order to be named, and I want no more assassins sent to silence truth. Her voice didn't shake. It rang with something new. Authority, earned, not inherited. The Empress looked past her to Cade, then slowly turned back. The humans won't forget this war, the Empress said. But perhaps peace can begin with one story, yours. She extended her hand. You will speak again, this time with me beside you, and you will not be punished. Not yet, not unless you lie again. Yelani didn't hesitate. She took her mother's hand with quiet strength. The council met one final time that day. This time, the transmission was public across all networks. Yelani stood beside her mother and spoke the truth again. This time, the people heard not just a daughter, but a leader. One who had risked everything to stop a war born from shadows. Her voice did not tremble. Her mother did not interrupt. The humans responded days later, not with weapons, but with a message. A single ambassador arrived in orbit, holding a white-patched flag with a Terran olive symbol. The same flag carried during the first contact mission. Cade was called to join the meeting, not as a soldier, but as a bridge between two worlds. He wore no armor. Only a gray uniform marked with no rank. At the summit, he stood beside Yelani. Neither of them smiled, but they didn't look away from one another either. She introduced him not as a guest, but as her ally. The ambassador nodded once and gave her a Terran datapad. It contained a signed agreement of ceasefire, pending joint investigation of the sabotage. It wasn't peace yet, but it was the start of one. That night, the city above Serrana lit its spires in green and gold, the Varillian colors for truth and survival. No fireworks, no parades, just light. In the high tower overlooking the clouds, Yelani removed her crown and placed it gently on the table. Cade sat near the window, watching the stars. She joined him without a word. He didn't ask what would happen next. She didn't explain. For once, they didn't need words. Her head found his shoulder again, but not from exhaustion. This time it was comfort. Her hand rested gently over his, fingers curling with quiet certainty. She didn't hate humans anymore. She didn't even fear them. Cade turned his head slightly. So, he said, still think I'm annoying? Her lips curved into a faint smile. Yes, but I've decided I can live with that. She leaned in closer, her eyes closing once. Again under the soft light of the tower, for the first time since the war began, she slept without fear.